So the agenda for today, we'll do a little introduction to the team and the project, who we are. We're then going to hear from Councillor Pete Sudbury, who's the Oxfordshire County Council's Cabinet Member for Climate Change Delivery and the Environment. Then from Ian Courtney, who'll be telling us about his experience of making changes to carbon and energy in a school. And then we'll be hearing from Michael and Moira from EIE, who are going to take us through what the service is and how you can get involved. And then there'll be opportunity for questions at the end. But like I said, if you have any questions throughout, then pop them in chat or raise your hand and we'll get to them as well. So an introduction. So action on carbon and energy in schools. This is what we just called a soft launch, which means whilst there are pages on the website that are live and ready to view, it's not fully populated for another week or so, and we're slowly adding information as we go along. And the events that you'll hear about in a bit, the webinars and workshops that are going to be available, they're going to be live. They're on the website too at the moment, but they're going to be starting in September. So this is a new service that's going to help schools in Oxfordshire improve their energy efficiency to help them cut carbon emissions, save money on energy bills, and make buildings more comfortable for their users as well, and create a better teaching and learning environment. I've mentioned it's delivered by the EIE team at Oxford Brookes, Low Carbon Hub, that's me, and it's funded by Oxfordshire County Council. So why energy efficiency? There's a couple of stats up there, but essentially addressing energy performance of our buildings, homes, businesses, schools, is a key part of addressing and tackling climate change. Energy use in buildings accounts for a big proportion of carbon emissions in the UK. And you'll see there that there's a stat there about how Oxfordshire County maintained schools alone contributed quite a large proportion of the emissions. So making cuts to energy use can make a big difference to Oxfordshire's overall carbon emissions. Energy use is also quite expensive, and it's a significant portion of a school's annual spend, often second only to staffing. So making changes to school buildings can significantly reduce energy demand and help schools save money, so that money can be put to other uses. So why get involved? There's kind of touched on a couple of reasons why you might want to make changes to improvements to energy performance of buildings. We know that schools are leaders in their communities, and so taking action on carbon can have a wider impact in your communities. We've talked about saving money on energy bills, and the changes that can be made can also provide an opportunity to teach students about these wider issues, and we've often seen them being used as an educational tool. And also, yes, like I've said, improving buildings can make a better and more comfortable working environment. That's a really quick whistle stop of why the service exists. I'm now going to hand over just for a quick welcome from Councillor Pete Sudbury, if that's okay. If you need to unmute yourself.
Yes, that's fine, thank you. I have a pretty amazing job because I get to turn up to meetings with very clever people who have done things that I haven't a clue how to do, which are really, really useful. Having been a governor of a school, I know that many of our school buildings are in an appalling condition, are very, very poor in energy terms. And I remember before the election and getting on the cabinet, I remember looking at the carbon emissions from schools from the county and thinking that was quite a big number, and asking what was being done and being given answers that were basically some version of nothing or not very much. And thinking that wasn't very satisfactory. And it is great to see people get on with doing the hard yards that get all of our schools eventually up to the standard of insulation that they need. Otherwise, they get very cold in winter. And in fact, the other thing we need to start thinking about is how to keep them cool in summer, because we're beginning to notice it gets quite hot in summer. I'm certainly hot. And I think, and we know that high temperatures are very bad for concentration and stuff. So there is a lot we need to do to our schools, and this is a really good start. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm now going to hand over to Ian Courtney, who is going to give us his perspective as a governor on the things they've done in climate and energy action. Ian, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Hello. Hello, everyone, and thanks for inviting me. I'm going to share some experience that I had whilst I was chair of a large secondary school in Devon before I moved up to Oxfordshire about 2 years ago, and now I'm bringing the message. So I was chair of government at Oakhampton College, and I'll come back to what we achieved a little bit later on. I've only got 5 minutes or so, so it's going to be a bit whistle stop. So what I thought I'd do is keep to the practicalities, because running a school is difficult enough without COVID and everything else that's hit them in the last year or two. So I'm going to think about, from a leadership point of view, from governors and head teachers and senior leadership team, 4 key topics, which I'll rattle through quickly. 1, motivation. So why should we do it and how should we keep at it? What is leadership in this particular aspect of the school's life? What's the role of the head teacher, the senior team, and the governors or trustees of the school? Bearing in mind that Carterton is the only remaining maintained secondary school in Oxfordshire. All the other secondaries are academies, and so I need to say trustees as well as governors. And finally, how do we raise the issue on the agenda? How do we keep it live in the life of the school and the cycle of governance and management? So I'd open by saying that I'm just reminding people of what the 3 key responsibilities of school governance are, and that leads into the motivation. So the three responsibilities are that governors and trustees set the strategy and the culture of the school. So we set a 5-year strategy, and year 1 of that strategy drives what's called the school improvement plan, which is the live document that the school works to. So we set the sense of direction, if you like, the direction of travel. The second responsibility is finance, best use of the school's finance, prudent, meeting all the rules and requirements and so on, and ensuring value for money. I'll come back to that, obviously. And the third responsibility is the educational performance of the pupils and students in the school. And I think if we hang on to the thread that these are educational establishments, we'll stay close to the point of the operation that I'm going to discuss. So leadership. How is it evident? Well, I would say that firstly, the head teacher doesn't have to lead this particular aspect. You know, they may or may not be a believer. They don't have to think, oh, there's one more thing I have to do. So what we did in Devon, and what really lifted our school from the ground, was we appointed an ambassador, happened to be a science teacher, and we gave him an extra responsibility, which grew and grew over years until it became his full-time job. So an ambassador on the staff, ideally somebody who's in the school, who is paid, and this is one of the key responsibilities of their job. So what they need to remember, and I think what leadership needs to keep hold of, is that there are 2 strands to this. One is to cut waste. So it's much easier and cheaper to change the culture of a school. In fact, it doesn't cost anything to change the culture of a school, to change the practice, the daily way that people go about their business and go about their education. So we saved nearly 30% of our energy bills in Oakhampton by simply changing the culture, by telling people to be more energy conscious. So, you know, rather than having the heating on and opening the window, or, you know, leaving all the lights on, or leaving computers on all night, or leaving water heaters on the whole time, those kinds of really simple things. And don't forget water in all this, by the way. It's a very expensive utility. It literally goes, it's your money going down the drain. So we just need somebody that appreciates all of that, that's engaged, that has got the ear of the students and pupils and of their colleagues, to start to change that culture within the school. They need to be knowledgeable and or willing to learn. When we started doing this in about 2010, there wasn't so much information around as there is now. So that's more straightforward to do that. They need to be determined or dogged. I've actually written pain in the neck here. So you do probably just need to be a little bit naggy. And oh, he's on at me again because I left my light on. And it takes a little while, and you have to be really quite determined. And so our particular ambassador down in Oakhampton certainly did qualify for the PITN badge occasionally. What we need to do is to carry pupils and students with us. So remembering all the way through this that we are an educational establishment. So all of our students and pupils can become ambassadors. So, they can then go home and nag their parents and grandparents. And so the impact becomes wider and wider. from the activities within the school. They can become believers, if you like. So the third aspect that I touched on was the role of the head teacher, the senior leadership team, and also the governors and trustees. So again, the head teacher doesn't have to do it all. They just need to believe that it's a worthwhile thing to do. They need to remember those motivations of cutting waste, saving money, the educational benefits that can come from it all, and just the social responsibility of cutting waste. So I like to think that, so say 30 years ago, I may be the only one that can remember 30 years ago in the audience, but drinking and driving became socially unacceptable, from being, oh, he's a bit of a lad, to being, that's completely out of order. That kind of culture change happened probably about 30 years ago. And what we need to do now is to get the waste of energy and burning carbon to be the next social irresponsible. So people will tut if somebody leaves a light on. How could they possibly do that? How irresponsible? That's the sort of culture thing that I'm talking about. So we need to believe that in taking action in our school, and I'll come to some of the examples that we did in a second, we can have an impact on climate change and on global warming. We will save money. That's not a can. You will save money. You will reduce waste, and you will achieve educational benefits. So you'll send out ambassadors into the society, and they will believe lifelong. The role of trustees and governors, as I say, they set the strategy. So they can set the head teacher's performance indicators. In other words, their annual targets, what they need to achieve in the coming year, that is set by trustees and governors. So there's a very clear tool there to raise this item on the agenda and to make it an important, in fact, critical factor of where the school's going. So remembering the duty of governors to hold the head teacher to account, that's where that comes in. So I suggest that the governing board appoints a champion, a sustainability champion, we called it, to actually personify that, to be in the school and to interrogate the data, interrogate waste, to be relentless. And a question that was asked at one of my governors' meetings a year or two back, which I thought was probably even more relevant today, was why are we sending £100,000 a year to Gazprom rather than employing more teachers? That, I thought, was a cracking question. So very quickly about Oakhampton College, we became as a school carbon neutral in 2011. This is a 1,400 place secondary school on the northern edge of Dartmoor, a very poor rural area. We had 0 energy bills from 2014-15. Then very quickly that went into negative costs. And one of the most entertaining things I ever did as a governor, called me a geek, is I went into the meter cupboard, and you know the little wheel with a black line on that whizzes round to show you how fast the energy is coming in. That will stop and then go backwards. That's an awesome thing to see. So we, as a result of saving all those energy costs, and I would put that before this year's big increases, we were saving something in the region of £240,000 a year, which is 6 or 7 teachers probably. And so as a result of that, Oakhampton College had the lowest pupil staff ratio in the county. And very shortly after that, we achieved an outstanding rating from Ofsted. And I have no hesitation in suggesting that those things are linked. How do we keep this all on the agenda? Well, and this is some more practical issues will come out here. So governors and trustees set the agenda, as I've said. They set the head teachers' KPIs, and they set the agenda for each individual meeting. So there will normally be a resources committee on within the governing board, and I suggest that the terms of reference of that committee are changed to include sustainability, energy consumption, energy waste, energy generation, and so on. So something like a sustainability part of the brief of that committee, so that it becomes a standing item on their agenda. Appoint a sustainability governor or trustee, as I've said, to really drive that and push it through. So what trustees and governors need to do is to be relentless and to paraphrase Tony Blair, educate, educate, educate. So that's what I was going to say. I think I've gone slightly over time, but I'll be here for a little while if anybody's got any questions. But if anybody would like, I'm more than happy to go through at another time exactly what we did to achieve zero carbon and negative energy bills. So that's me. Thank you very much.
I think that would be really interesting, Ian. I'm very glad you offered. I think that's really great. Thank you. Councillor Pete Sudbury, do you have a question now for Ian?
Yes, I did. He's going to rush off. With the advent of COVID, there are a lot of schools now that have the heating on and the windows open in winter because we have to ventilate. Has Oakhampton found a way around that, or is that that was a direct instruction yes.
from the Director of Public Health? So no, we had to do that, and it made us weep, I have to say.
Yes,
it kind of sent shivers down my spine every time I thought about it. So thanks for reminding me.
No, I mean there is another alternative, which is to get UVC filters and filter the air. They're in place now, but it took a long time. No. I'm currently a governor. It's several schools, including a couple in West Berks, and it was only a few months ago that we managed to get those. Yes.
Actually, Moira's just asked a question in the chat saying, are you working towards this at Carterton now, Ian?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, we have a biomass boiler already, and our buildings are in quite a poor condition. So we're actually very much pushing forward on that. So yeah, some of it's really sexy, So at Oakhampton College, we won all sorts of competitions and grants, and we put in biomass, and we put in a anaerobic digester and a wind turbine, and nearly 500,000 volts of photovoltaic cells on the roofs and so on. That's all good, sexy stuff. But actually, it was insulation, double glazing, keeping doors closed, all that kind of stuff that made half the difference. We replaced 3,500 fluorescent tubes throughout the school with more modern ones that don't need a starter running the whole time. We put in software to turn all the computers off at night, and a lot of it was not sexy, but the big projects, those are hundreds of thousands of pounds, and they're part of the mix, but they're only part of the mix. You can achieve a lot by culture change.
I think that I'm on a constant search for sexy pictures of insulation. So yeah, it's an issue, but that's really great. Thank you. I think I'm going to hand over to Michael and Moira now, who are going to take us through the ACES service, if that's all right.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks, Beth, and thanks to our speakers for setting the context. We're not pretending by any means that schools aren't doing enough or don't have enough on their plates already, and there is an issue about wastage that we need to focus on. But as you can already tell from Ian's stories, there are some complex and difficult issues. And our role in this is about helping prioritize and simplify where possible, and also to be there when we're stuck with difficult problems where the answers are not obvious. But in any case, what I want to talk about first is we were trying to be very logical. Moira and myself have worked with schools inside the county and outside for many years, and there's been different iterations of support. But it had been long enough that I thought the first step really needs to be surveying our potential audiences, and I will talk about those audiences in more detail. So my first few slides are just going to be about what our initial survey responses are. And don't panic if you think, wait, I didn't get a chance to answer that survey. We've certainly learned from this process that we need to keep the lines of communication in both directions open and continue to respond, because who knows where we're all going to be working from in the next few months or years. So next slide, please. So I won't go through every single survey question, but it was really good to get a number of responses. And the first slide here, I'm just talking about what the respondents said they were looking for. So the first is about developing those actions or measures, whatever you want to call them, that are specific to each school. It's very easy to say, reduce the energy you spend on lighting, heating, and so on. But it's about those specific actions. So that was really useful to know that everyone's thinking along our lines. The second was about the need for training and examples, so case studies of how to get from A to B on finance and implementing actions. So that's obviously a big issue. It's a big elephant in the room. There is some funding from various formats for our various audiences, and we'll certainly be acutely aware of that and helping that along throughout. However, as has already been pointed out, there are low and no cost actions that are certainly worth prioritizing where it's feasible. So we'll be looking at that. In my experience, I consider the 3 topic areas somewhat evenly distributed, not always, not at every school. So there is often a focus on technology, but there's also controls and management, and as well, inevitably, the human behavior factor. I will bet you real money that today or 2 days ago, there were schools that whipped open the windows when it was 29 degrees outside because they, quote, wanted a breeze and let really hot air into the classrooms. And it's those kinds of behaviors that we also need to help with myth busting around. Final point there is about examples to help governors and heads and staff. And I should divide that staff into 2 groups. I think I'm very happy that we've been joined by people in finance and school business management positions. We're not ignoring the teaching element as well during the ACES project. And equally, we're not ignoring the role and the pressures on heads and governors. So we're not always going to separate those 3 audience types out. Sometimes we'll all get together and be able to talk about problems and solutions and share. So that was good that the survey reflected that. Next slide, please. So just to round out off the survey results, there was and I'm not entirely surprised by this. We know that the work of educating children is very demanding indeed, even more so now than ever. And so with that level of time deficiency, there was not surprisingly a call for short how-to videos and nice succinct case studies to help people along. If you imagine that ACES is I'm trying to think of the right food stuff. I want to say a piece of fruit from a health point of view, something like a citrus. There are different levels of depth that people can engage in the program as it unfolds. So we understand that it's, the website is open to all. We're not going to stop people from outside of the county using the resources on the website. Equally, the events, we do have to do a little bit of vetting for the sake of having online events, which is my other point here, that they are very popular in terms of our survey's response. And then in a few slides, I'll be talking about the other sort of deeper levels of support that we can provide. So as people move through those different levels at different times, and hopefully at their own speeds, we'll be responding to their needs. A little bit difficult, so the online meetings and being able to access recordings of online meetings, again, keeping shortness in mind. We also are aware that we asked for the online or other sessions, when was a good time. It was about evenly split between morning, afternoon, and after school sessions. So we'll try to respond to that. The only thing that was clear as a steer on there was, please don't bother us during lunchtime. Fair enough. And we've suggested a number of topics that we'll cover as a kind of initial, if you like, first year run. And generally the survey responses had very good interest across all of those topics. There were none that were disliked. So we'll just move on to the next slide, please. So this is our first run of 4 workshops. We're going to generally try and stick to one per month, but that's not going to stop us from putting up how-to videos. Moira and myself are going to work up over the summer some very short scripts on frequently asked questions to populate the website with. So I'll leave you to look at those, but essentially what the logic is here is everyone's at a different part in their journey, and every school is made up of lots of different people. So we're starting at the start with that first workshop. It's all about the rather boring and unsexy, as has been mentioned, compiling of energy data and reviewing some of the controls you have in schools. Not exactly a high priority, as the goal is very often just keep the school running. But there's a lot of interesting elements of that I think are worth bringing to bear, particularly in light of energy bills doing what they're doing. The second workshop will be a bit more traditional energy efficiency and heating, about optimization. And we will try and, there's obviously a lot to cover, so we're not going to do everything in one workshop. The third is obviously there's an argument to put solar panels as fast as possible and switch to heat pumps to decarbonize. And I think it is worth us at least beginning the discussions on that in a workshop. And then finally, of our first four, talking about engaging students and staff, both very popular in the survey results. Right, next slide, please. So I'm just going to pause in my rambling to just ask Moira if there's anything that I've obviously missed before I delve a little bit deeper into what else ACES will be offering.
No, I think that's good so far, Michael.
Okie doke, thank you. Always good to know. So part of the ACES program is we want to make it as easily accessible as possible. So we will have a help desk, although we will support that with a frequently asked questions section. We're already starting to get an idea of what common questions are, and rightly so. And we will try to set up answers in a way that are succinct, bespoke, and as quickly as can be helpful. A lot of people on the call, or at least some of them, are known to us because they've had an energy assessment in the not too distant past where we've been able to provide them. There will be more coming through the ACES, but not as many, obviously, as there are schools. So many of you are familiar with the energy assessment. It's sometimes, in my opinion, incorrectly called an energy audit. We're not about finger wagging. We're about helping you find that wastage, which can be quite difficult to do. So there'll be limited numbers on those, but those who will take our call to action, which I'm about to reveal, can sign up to them in come September. We also will be offering a thermal imaging service. You would normally think that would be done during an energy assessment, but Moira and I have been flat out in hot months as well as winter months, quite untraditionally. So thermal imaging doesn't, well, it works in this weather, but it shows you completely the reverse picture. Probably very obvious to all the students gasping for air inside the schools. And we will also be talking about that dirty little secret, boiler room insulation. It may look like every one of your boiler rooms has it, but there are a lot of little bits and pieces of valves missing, and you can lose a lot of heat that way. So we're very happy that the county has endorsed us providing some specific support in that area. So yeah, looking forward to doing all of that. Right, I think I'm on to the final slide of this section. There we go, yes. So here's our call to action for all of those patient enough to have stayed on the call. Beth has told me quite happily our lovely new ACES website is up. For some reason, someone has already taken ACES, but I think ace-schools.org is pretty good. So please do have a visit to the website. When you do, if you could sign up to the newsletter, that's great. We've been using old contacts to get in touch with everyone, but we're going to have to move to a newsletter format very soon. Equally, those 4 events that I mentioned, you can sign up to those now. I might feel a bit ambitious to you, so don't worry if you're not sure what your schedule is going to look like come September, but please do. And you can also contact the help desk to ask us any questions that don't get answered in the next section. Again, Moira, did I miss anything that you were expecting me to say there?
No, just in terms, particularly items for the newsletter, etc. We'd just love to hear what people feel is missing. And we're very happy to do short videos on anything that you think is relevant. So keep that information as a two-way flow would be great.
Yeah, that's a good point, Moira. I think come September, we'll also, the newsletter will start to be populated by the first few videos that we do, hopefully.